Let's see. All right, I think we're getting connected. Hi, Christine.
Hey, Ashken.
How are you?
Good. How are you? How are things in Chicago?
Pretty well, thank you. How's it going with you?
Great. Things are, bright and sunny in California.
Yeah, it's bright and sunny here too. However, it's not always like California, as you guys always have it in Chicago. We're in a good season right now, but in a month or two, we're gonna go towards that cold that everybody
Yeah.
knows.
Chicago has its perks though. The city views and the skyscrapers, it's always a nice view there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is. You're right. Absolutely. That's great. We love the city of Chicago, but obviously California. And I see the surfboard behind you that represents California.
Of course.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, thanks for joining me today. This is wonderful to have you. I know it's Friday, and you guys are probably wrapping up end of the week, so I appreciate your time.
Of course. Yeah, I was kind of catching a little bit about what you were saying, starting off with international students and admissions. And I
Yeah.
know that there is a lot of questions around it. So let me know how I can help.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great. So let's talk about first, before we actually dive into that start, let's talk about a little bit about American English College and talk about a little bit about the background, your role, as well as just the university itself a little bit.
Yeah, so American English College is an English language program in California. We have two locations in Los Angeles, and we started back in 1983. So we are an ACCET accredited and CVIS approved school, which means that we can issue the Form I-20 for international students looking to study abroad in the US. As an English program, we have 10 levels of English, and we also have more advanced courses like Business English or TOEFL IBT. But we do have this specialty where we focus more on international students looking for a pathway into a US community college or university. And we also help working professionals who are looking to improve their communication skills for work. But a little bit of a fun fact about our school is that
Yeah.
we've also been family owned and
Okay.
operated for over 30 years. So
Okay.
this kind of culture of, helping students and really making sure that they're well taken care of is really part of our school culture.
That's wonderful. That's great to know. How many campuses did you mention that you have?
Yeah, we have two locations in Los Angeles, in
Yep.
Southern California. So both of those locations are in safe, very multicultural communities.
Yep.
So students would be able to go to downtown and Santa Monica Beach rather conveniently, but still be in a very kind of affordable spot, which is kind of hard to find in California nowadays.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Okay, great. Thank you for that. So let's dive into it. As I was mentioning earlier before you joined, so we want to talk about a little bit about English admission and then conditional admission.
Mhm.
I know that it's a hot topic. A lot of people talk about it. Of course, one of the challenges for international students always is the language barrier, English, right? Even if you have a TOEFL or IELTS or other English proficiency tests, it's always good to practice and have that efficiency in terms of your language to the level that you can be comfortable, sit in classes, continue your major, understand what you are actually studying. It's really important. So let's talk about conditional admission versus English admission. There are some facts and myths about it that if you get an English admission, your visa may get denied. Explain that a little bit from obviously you're from school, and our audience would love to hear that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. It's a very common kind of impression out there
Hmm.
that having English only will result in a visa denial. And I would say it's less so about the type of school you apply to and more so about the experience that the student has at the US Embassy interview. And of course, studying at an English language program, one is a more cost-effective way to get into a pathway for university or community college. And
Hmm.
it also really helps them prepare for success. Uh,
Absolutely.
for for example, at our school, we help students gain the English that they need, but also the more kind of necessity things like getting them situated with, living and being acclimated to an American classroom, which can be a little more difficult to do in a larger type classroom where,
Sure.
Community college standards, it's 50 students in a classroom, kind of like a mini stadium. So for us, I think having that English foundation is important, but to kind of demystify the English only and visa denials, it's really important that students have a well prepared interview going into it. So we've helped thousands of students, receive a visa approval for English only. And so I'm going to kind of talk about some tips that I think would be helpful.
Please do, yeah.
So one of the things that I think really helps is having the documentation well prepared and well organized. So having, loose pieces of paper, the bank statements kind of jumbled together, really doesn't give the visa officer a good impression. They want to see that the student is taking this opportunity to study abroad seriously. So, having it even in some sort of binder. I know One Key Visa puts together a nice package. That's really good because presenting that over to them will show that, you have thought through all the pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's very true. And if I can add to it, you're absolutely right. And in fact, this is funny you say that because I'm right after our live, so I have like a video session that I'm going to record as like tips that we give to our audience and students, and one of them is about how to be organized when you go to embassy for your interview. It's really important. So like if you're searching for a document while the officer is asking you, it's not a really, I don't want to say it's not a good look, but you better be prepared, know where everything is,
Right.
and understand. So if I say, give me this, then I can just real quick pull it out and say, here it is.
Exactly.
Yep.
And a lot of this is also, based on first impressions. Like you're giving them the intention of being a student and knowing what you want.
Yeah.
So, tip number 2 is actually understanding your own plan and when you will plan to return home. I think a lot of people forget that an F1 visa is a non-immigrant visa, which means, that the US Embassy officer is thinking, if we give this opportunity to a student, we want to know that their intentions are to return to their home country and, have, opportunities there. And, for whatever reason, if your plans change later, that's also fine. But, showing strong ties back home is one of those kind of key indicators for a visa approval.
Super helpful. Absolutely. What else?
And part of that, like showing that study plan, is having that conditional acceptance letter. So conditional acceptance allows a student to be able to show that they will move on to a community college or university after their English studies. So as they're talking to the embassy officer and they're saying, hey, look, like doing 6 months here and moving on to this school after, they have that proof and that documentation up front to support that.
That's great, absolutely, and you're 100% correct. We always talk about having some strategy in order to show the officer that this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I want to do, and this is why I'm doing it, and that's all part of it. You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so along with that, like being able to communicate this plan to the embassy officer is also really important. So, the prep of being able to answer very common questions like, how did you find out about this school and where will you be living? Those are all kind of key indicators as to like how much a student has planned for this opportunity. So, and I know that One Key Visa also helps with that as well.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, that's true. Yeah. So great. So I think what we covered is for everybody to understand that is conditional admission and English admission, two separate things. However, none of them are a ground or fact for your visa denial. That's not the case. What you want to present at the time of getting your visa is a strategy, to plan, and to show that why you're doing this and why you qualify, regardless of what you're applying for. That's the most important part.
Exactly. It's all dependent on the applicant and how prepared they are, less so about, the type of school that they're using to come to the US with.
That is absolutely correct. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so let's talk. Was there anything else you want to add to this topic?
No, I think like the last piece, just to like add on to impressions is to make sure that you're dressed like you're going to a job interview. Um, Again, back to first impressions, sometimes it's that one little thing that is, dependent on a visa approval or denial. So that also is a helpful tip.
Plays an important part. Absolutely. That's great. Thank you for that.
hmm
So the second thing that we're going to talk about, so the most common questions that people ask, obviously, is working while on student visa. Now, I know that you and I talked about working on campus, off campus, but let's put that aside. We've talked about that, and perhaps we can jump into a little bit more detail when it comes to our next live.
hmm
So I'm going to get you promised that you're going to do this again with us. But let's talk about OPT and CPT.
hmm So CPT is a curricular practical training,
Yeah.
which is categorized as required work for a student to graduate. This can, sometimes be in the field of STEM, like engineering or even, teaching. Those specific majors might require a student to get field experience as part of their graduation. So CPT allows the student to be able to do so even while on a student visa.
Yeah.
Um, and so optional practical training, or OPT,
Yeah.
it's a very similar thing in the sense that it's an off-campus opportunity
hmm
that has to be part of the major that you're studying in. So if you're studying to be a teacher, you have to find opportunities off campus to be a teacher. And the OPT is after your graduation, and it gives you 1 year to work in the US legally. So you'll be able to use your education and practice it in real life.
That's wonderful. And of course, that's done with the permission of the university as well as the U.S. Immigration.
Exactly. While you're in school, though, one thing to note is students can only work up to 20 hours.
hmm
But once they graduate and they have their OPT for a year, they can work up to 40 hours a week.
Exactly. That's perfect. That's great.
Mhm.
So let's stop. Again, I apologize if I'm jumping too fast to the other
No,
questions.
it's
If
great.
there's
Yeah.
anything else, yeah. So we can go to the next topic. It was which is, I really like this actually, as you and I discussed. Tips and kind of what can students do to increase their chances to get a admission, right? Think about, again, somebody applying at your school, or any school for that matter, but your school particularly. What can they do to increase the chances to definitely get their admission, and then also what can they do in order to be more successful when it comes to coming to the US and living here and adopting and going through obviously changes.
Totally. I think for English admissions and getting that process started, it's really being prepared with the documentation and the planning side. So knowing when you want to study abroad, having that bank statement ready, and planning all the obvious things like, living cost and study cost is really, I guess, the biggest challenge, especially because English language studies is probably, the first time a student gets to study abroad
Yeah.
and all the challenges that come with it. Um, so really just the planning process of documentations is important for our end. In terms of university admissions and trying to get into that school that, a student has always dreamed of going,
hmm
I think English proficiency is important. So being able to either do that in the form of improving their TOEFL score, um, or even if you're not a great test taker, using one of our ESL pathway schools.
Yeah.
This pathway allows students to take up to level 6 in our program, and they gain access to a list of partner schools that they'll be able to use our certificate for
Yeah.
admissions purposes.
That's wonderful. Can I ask you? Let me jump in real quick. So that
Yeah,
means, and for students, that means that you can take those pathway at your school, those pathway programs at your school, and once that is done, going to the partner universities that you are partnered with, and they do not need to take TOEFL or IELTS anymore.
that's exactly correct.
Yeah.
So, being able to have this kind of streamlined pathway where you're using your time to improve your English and then not have that extra hurdle of having to take a test just to prove it is great. And a part of like a service at our school is helping students figure out that right partner school for them. And getting ready for all that documentation. That's kind of a free service we provide just by studying with us.
Absolutely, that makes sense. And you know what, to add to that, I was 20 something years ago when I first came here. I was in high school and I didn't know a word of English, right? Not a word of English, and I could say hello, maybe that's it. But I thought about this while I was learning English. I thought about this, and one thing that it made me realize, and then after that, it actually made me like go really fast, was the fact that I just don't want to memorize English. I don't want to study it in order just to memorize it and pass something. I want to learn it, truly
Mhm.
learn it, so then I can use it, whether if it's to pass my exams in school, 100%, but also when it comes to actual like day-to-day life, right? I need to know it rather than just like reading something and passing an exam. So, taking
Right.
the English classes, I completely agree, it's super important, super helpful. But also I want to put emphasis on what you just said for people to understand is that the fact that those pathway programs are great. If you don't have English proficiency tests like TOEFL or IELTS, or even if you do but you don't feel comfortable yet, you can take these pathway programs, and then you no longer need to take TOEFL or IELTS going to a partner university to continue major that you want.
Hmm. And we have even found, some students who really cram for an exam
Mhm.
might not necessarily even be good in English in everyday life, which kind of like hurts them in a different way. Like they might get into the school, but then when
Yeah,
they're there, they're like, oh no, I have to actually use my English to, catch the things that are happening in the classroom
absolutely.
or make friends or, write a really great essay, which is, a constant homework
Yes, it is.
duty for a college student.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that, English proficiency, even though it's just particular parts for admissions, is plays a bigger role when they're actually in the school.
I completely agree. It plays a huge role. Yeah. Any tips for students who are here in the U.S.? What can be, or let's say for still somebody who's outside of the United States, but tips for them when they come here? What can they do to be a better student, to adjust?
That's a great question. I think a lot of the time students get overwhelmed because it's a lot. So they try to find all the answers by themselves or get frustrated if they can't. So a tip is really to use the resources that you have once you get here. The school that you're attending. They have student advisors and counselors where their job is to help students feel more comfortable. Go and ask those questions. No question is too much because, for an international student traveling thousands of miles away from home, the US wants to make sure that you feel comfortable here. And, even resources like One Key Visa, who has even helped them get started, it's always okay to, reference back and if they ever need anything, because, our relationship is to really help students feel comfortable and safe here.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's great. Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And everything that we talked about is super important for, and I know what it takes, to be honest with you, to come here, because it is not an easy decision. It's not an easy thing to do. I'm sure you do as well. And you deal with everyday students. It's not easy when you come here to adapt to a new culture, new language, even simple things that people might forget, just like going to a grocery shop, right? Where do you buy certain things? Just all those things takes time to get adjusted. So thank you for the suggestions. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and we also even have on our YouTube channel, we have 5 tips for international students studying in the US. And we kind of like mention helpful apps like Yelp or Uber to get around,
Yeah,
little kind of hacks that help international students feel more comfortable in the US also really helps, especially if, you don't maybe have the school readily available to help you. There's these kind of quick tips to get by.
that's wonderful. That's great. Well,
Thanks.
thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. This is great. So, I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot and I'm going to ask you to do these things, maybe.
Of course.
Absolutely. That's great. So we look forward to having our next session.
Yeah, I was even thinking maybe I could invite one of our partner schools next time to join us.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Absolutely. That's such a great idea. We can definitely do that. So we can specifically talk about a little bit about more pathway and conditional admissions.
yeah,
That's wonderful. That's a great idea.
perfect. Thank you so much for the opportunity and have a wonderful weekend,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time again.
Thank you.
All right. Take
Take
care.
care.